So we can all agree that crime in DC is out of control. And even though it's come down from its highs, that doesn't mean that it's safe. Listen to Joe Scarborough, another person who's not a fan of President Trump, make this point.
Washington, D.C. Right now ranks third in America in gun homicides. And so those homicides continue to be up there. Washington has declined. But when people say, oh, you know, it's not as bad as it was 3 or 4 years ago, or it's not as bad as it was in the 1970s, OK, great. But do we really want to measure ourselves by the violent 1970s?
Joe's finally making some sense, right? Yet there are still others who are in denial. Watch this next clip and see if you can count how many times you hear the words 30-year low.
Crime in D.C. is down this year, according to D.C. police, and the stats go through this morning. All crime, property crime, violent crime, all of it's down.
Trump declared a crime emergency in D.C., even though violent crime there is at a 30-year low.
It's a 30-year low for crime in D.C.
Violent crimes at a 30-year low in Washington, D.C.
D.C. is currently experiencing a 30-year low when it comes to violent crime.
Violent crime in the district is at a 30-year low, according to the Justice Department.
Violent crime is at a 30-year low in the district.
We know that violent crime in the D.C. area is at a 30-year low.
Contrary to the president's claims, violent crime in Washington, D.C. last year hit a 30-year low.
We're talking about D.C. having a 30-year low in violent crime.
Crime is at a 30-year low in the District of Columbia.
The U.S. Attorney's Office said in January that violent crime in D.C. was at a 30-year low.
Crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low and a downward trajectory.
Every statistic shows that Washington, D.C. has not been safer in the last 30 years.
You got to hand it to the Democrats and the corrupt media, right? They are always on the same page, and they always repeat the same exact talking points. But there are a couple of things we need to consider when we hear these figures. The first thing is that the population of Washington, D.C. has increased, and that will affect these figures. Here is Greg Pemberton. He is the head of the MPD Police Union.
Obviously, you've seen the rhetoric over the past few days. Crime is down, which is absolutely not true. And there's a number of reasons why. First of all, one of the things they're doing is they're saying crime's at a 30-year low. And the way that they're coming to that is that they're using a per capita measurement. And 30 years ago, there was only 550,000 residents of the district. Today, there's 750,000. So even though the raw numbers of crimes, of homicides, of robberies, of carjackings have gone up against the total population, you can make it look like it's gone down. And that's how they're very cutely getting away with that tidbit.
Think about that. The per capita figure that they're giving you is found by dividing the number of homicides by the population. So when the population changes, that ratio changes too. As the population goes up, the rate per 100,000 goes down. Here's an example. We'll use the number they used last year. Last year, they had 187 homicides. And because the population was 500,000 people, we divide that 187 by 5, and we get a rate per 100,000 of 37. Now, assume next year they have the exact same number of homicides with no change. But because the population has gone up from 500,000 to 700,000, we're no longer dividing that 187 by 5. We have to divide it by 7. And that gives us a new rate of 27, which is 10 points lower and a decrease of nearly 28%. And this allows them to hide an increase in homicides. For example, we'll say that the next year homicides go up 10%. So we'll change this 187 to 206. You could see we had an increase of 19 homicides, or 10%. We'll change this one to 206 as well. Now we're not dividing 187 by 7, we're dividing 206 by 7. And when we do that, it does increase to 29, but we're still showing a decrease overall of 22.5%. So even though the number of murders went up 10%, they're still showing a decrease in the homicide rate. This is how they're fooling you. So that's the first thing we need to realize. The increased population has driven the rate down. The second thing we need to know when you hear people say crime is at a 30-year low is that there's one particular crime that isn't counted in those statistics.
Did you read this about the stats? Now they were compiled.
Playing with them.
Oh my God. Playing with them? Felony assault is not considered a violent crime now in their crime stats. Felony, not assault. Felony assault.
Right.
Felony means usually prison is tied to that.
Yeah. Not just some easy misdemeanor where you get your hand slapped.
Felony assault.
Yeah.
They just stopped counting it. They're no longer going to include felony assaults, but it's actually worse than that. Listen to Pemberton explain that they're changing the classification of other felonies at the scene.
When our members respond to the scene of a felony offense where there is a victim reporting that a felony occurred, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or a captain that will show up on that scene and direct those members to take a report for a lesser offense. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or a stabbing or a carjacking, they will order that officer to take a report for a theft or an injured person to the hospital or a felony assault, which is not the same type of classification.
I cannot believe they're doing this. They're shit-canning shootings. When you take a report for someone being shot, don't you have to indicate in the body of the story that there was a shooting? How can you possibly classify that as a simple aided being removed to the hospital? It just blows my mind. But apparently, this is what they're doing. And when the bosses aren't showing up and changing the classification at the scene, they're going into the computer database after the report was taken, and they're changing it there.
But there's other things going on here. There was a local NBC affiliate here that uncovered a story in which one of the police commanders is now under investigation and suspended for allegedly changing the crime stats. He's accused of going into police databases, changing felonies to misdemeanors to keep those crime numbers down. And the response that he's provided publicly is that that's what the pattern of practice is within the command staff, and that all commanders are ordered to do this.
This is criminal. When a civilian files a false report, they should be charged, right? They never are, but they should be. You're telling me it's okay when a cop does it? These figures are being sent to the FBI and they're being manipulated. That's not fraud? This has to be illegal.
It is a crime under DC code. It would be false swearing and it would be false reporting. And those are statutes in the DC code that make it illegal to do that, to falsify police reports or to change the data.
He mentioned a commander who was suspended for this. Here's that report.
Well, hi there. The DC Police Union is putting its allegations on the record tonight, claiming police supervisors in the department are manipulating crime data to make it appear violent crime has fallen considerably when compared to last year.
The areas where we know that
That's Michael Pulliam standing with the chief of police at a recent news conference. At the time, he was the commander of the 3rd District. Pulliam was placed on administrative leave with pay and told he was under investigation for questionable changes to crime data.
What we've heard through our members and through members of management that are willing to talk with the union is that this is a directive from the command staff, is that they want to make sure that these classifications of these reports are adjusted over time to make sure that the overall crime stats stay down.
As of last Monday, when we spoke with Pemberton, DC crime data shows violent crime was down 28%. Today, the department's website says violent crime is down 25% when compared to the same time last year.
That's preposterous. There's absolutely no way crime could be down 28%. Last year, they suggested that it went down 34%.
Now, Chief Smith declined an on-camera interview, but tells News 4 she cannot comment on an ongoing investigation.
Of course she declined. This is absolute corruption. I think it's great that Trump took over for 30 days, but remember, a fish rots from the head down. If these corrupt leaders are allowed to stay in place after Trump leaves, it's going to go right back to where it was before he got there.